Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Cybersecurity 101 webinar. We're really proud today to have two state agencies, the Office of Consumer Affairs and the MassCyberCenter, here today to talk about cybersecurity and ways that we can protect ourselves and our organizations. Hopefully, I am sharing. You can see my shared screen of our presentation. Excellent, great. So just to give a quick overview of today's webinar, we have an hour scheduled today. We'll have a presentation led by both John Petrozelli of the MassCyberCenter, the director, and the Deputy Undersecretary of the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, David Martin. They'll be leading the presentation. And then hopefully towards the end, if there's time available, we will have a Q&A session. We do encourage folks, if you'd like, you can enter questions into the chat as we go through the presentation. We'll leave it up to the presenters if they can answer it at that time, they'll try to. And if they cannot, we'll try to do it at the end. But great to see everybody here. And with that, I will hand over to Deputy Undersecretary Martin.
Nick, thanks very much. Everyone can hear me just fine, I hope. Happy to be here. Thanks very much to Nick and John for putting a lot of this together. They did this last year with my boss, but I get the privilege of doing it this year. Again, I'm David Martin. I'm an attorney by background. Just returning to state government about 5 months ago in this role as a Deputy Undersecretary. Prior to that, I ran a little healthcare advocacy organization and had worked in state government prior to this in the Patrick administration and in the state Senate. So thrilled to get to work on this issue now, being over at the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, which we for short call COBRA, where we work to protect and empower consumers through advocacy and education, and to ensure a fair playing field for Massachusetts businesses that we regulate. We oversee a variety of programs: lemon law, data breach reporting, the home improvement contractor law, and you can see the rest on the screen. And we also oversee a series of agencies: Division of Banks, Division of Insurance, Division of Standards, and others. Division of Occupational Licensure, which actually licenses an enormous number of professions. And in that respect, the OCBAR is really sort of the backbone of the middle class. The kinds of professions that make everything work: your plumbers, electricians, CPAs, architects, landscape, just a broad range of professions that people get up to every day and they do their job, and that's what makes Massachusetts work. So it's very, very exciting. Nick, go on to the next slide if you can. So here we also run a consumer hotline where folks can call in with consumer questions. Often it's about things like lemon law, or if you have an incorrect price on the scanner at your local store somewhere, that's a violation, and there are rules around that. You should see signs everywhere. You can certainly call us up and we'll put you through to the right people. And then the next slide, I think it goes on for the Cyber Center.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Petrozelli. I'm the director of the MassCyberCenter. Here's our vision and mission. Just a little bit of background on me. I was a prior Air Force intelligence officer. I worked for the FBI for 17 years, and then I worked for a managed security services provider before coming over to MassCyberCenter. So here's our vision and mission. Nick, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, please. This is Cybersecurity Month, where we are doing this. Our theme this year is cybersecurity is economic security. And we've seen that where businesses who have cyber attacks, some are now not only fighting to get their data or protect their data, but they're also fighting for their livelihoods in terms of post-breach. And so cybersecurity is surely economic security, and we wanted to highlight that this year. Next slide, please. So we look at cybersecurity comprising 3 pillars: the people side of it, which is what we're doing today with educating the populace on cybersecurity best practices; technology; and then process. So the technology is clearly the technology tools you'd have, and then the policies and processes that you'd use to be able to implement the technology and train the organization. Next slide, please. We're primarily focusing on 3 main categories of threats. So the human element, which includes social engineering, we'll talk about that today; insider threats; and identity-based attacks. Again, we'll talk about that a bit today as well. Primarily today, we're going to be talking about that first vector or the first section. But there's also system intrusions, which is really a significant threat and is back as the primary threat this year when you look at all the different intelligence reports out there from different organizations. Once an attacker provides something to get access to your system, once they get some malware downloaded on your computer, they can do a whole host of different attacks and steal data and exfiltrate data and ransomware use. So system intrusions is still really significant. And then lastly is web application attacks. And those are those 0 days, which would be vulnerabilities that a vendor hasn't yet figured out is a vulnerability that hackers are exploiting. Or 1 days, which are identity or vulnerabilities that have been identified, but they're called 1 days or N days, which people haven't patched yet. So we'll talk about patching a little bit today as well. Next slide, please. And this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about in terms of our Cybersecurity 101 today. Next slide, please. So we're going to jump right into it and talk about probably the most common issue that so many people have when we talk about passwords. This is a chart that's a little bit older, but it's still using what most people are using to hash passwords. So we wanted to show you how in today's day and age, if you have data that's already been breached in terms of passwords, usernames, things like that have been stolen from previous years or decades, that data, if you have not changed your passwords from those breaches, could be used to hack into your accounts nowadays. I joke with my son all the time about he's a Yankees fan, I'm a Red Sox fan, so we talk about the Yankees and Red Sox both ended up in second or last place basically because they didn't win the World Series. So that's my for any Red Sox fans out there who are saying, why are you saying Red Sox terrible? Well, because if you're not first, you're last, I guess, essentially with World Series rings. But using a strong password or passphrase, something you can remember, something that's not easily tieable to you, so not using the names of your dogs or anything that you're posting on social media, not using your address or your name or elements of your family members' names. It's very important for you not to use anything like that. But it could be something you remember, like something from your favorite book, or like some kind of phrase from your that you like that you haven't posted anywhere. So things like that is what you can use for a password. Having a password manager is really helpful. In terms of that, I have probably 400, 500 passwords that I have, and I don't know any of them. I know the password to get into my vault, and I use biometrics to get into my password manager, so I don't have to remember those passwords. But that's a really good tool to help you so that you're not duplicating passwords and you're using really strong passwords that will get you into this bottom sector where you want to be in that 16 to 18 characters, uppercase, lowercase numbers, letters, and symbols. Next slide, please. David, do you have anything else to add for password security?
No, that was very comprehensive. Thanks.
Sure. So Nick, I'm just gonna, if you could stop sharing now, I'm gonna show you all a website called Have I Been Pwned? And this is a free resource out there. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. So I wanted to show you, so this is an email address that I use primarily when I'm, setting up a new account with something that I want I know is going to send me a lot of solicitations. So this is an old account that I had from the 1990s, but I use it because this is a good example to show you in terms of a data breach. My email account, I put it in here, and it's safe for me to put it into the site. I'm not providing any more information than just my email account, but this site is a mirror to what is leaked on the dark web. So in my case, if I put my email address in there, you can see that my email has been part of 18 data breaches. This is through no effort of my own. These are all data breaches where third parties lost my data. And so I'll take you through some of that, like the Internet Archive. Combo list is a list of combinations like from different hacks in the past. but it showed up in combo lists. When national public data was breached, my information was in there, and you can see the types of information that that was in there, like a lot of sensitive stuff. Passwords and emails for a lot of different programs. But again, passwords were in here. So if I was using a variation of a password that I had, let's say, for example, with Park Mobile, I should change that variation of that password and any possible variation of that password. So for example, a friend of mine used to use monkey1234 as their password. And I would say, like, that's literally on a list of passwords that hackers use in their dictionary type attacks. So they were like, well, fine, I'll change it. So they changed it to MON 1234 pound KEY. And I was like, no, you don't want any variation of that. Like, just change it to a passphrase or something like that, or get a password manager. But anyway, using this site, you can see that there's a lot of really valuable information for you on what data you have that has been compromised. And so then you can look to try to, the biggest thing from this is to figure out what passwords were compromised so that you don't keep using those passwords or variations of them. All right, thanks, Nick. If you don't mind sharing again, please.
Hopefully that looks correct for everybody.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, next slide, please. So another good way to get around having passwords or weak passwords is multi-factor authentication. So that would be something that you know, plus something that you have, or something that you are. And you can see what those look like there. A lot of you with Microsoft might have push notifications now, and there's various types of push notifications you can get. In some cases, you could use a notification that's just a simple up or down, accept or deny. In other cases with Microsoft, you could put in a number challenge, or you pick a number, where Microsoft might send you a prompt that has 3 numbers, and they've sent you separately, or on the screen they're displaying one number, and you pick that number, and that's your authentication. So multi-factor authentication is absolutely crucial. I liken it to locking your doors and windows on the first floor of your house, because that's the simplest security that you could put in place. It used to be close to 100%. That if you had multi-factor authentication in place, that you were pretty much invulnerable. However, nowadays that's not the case. Now you just need to have it in place, or you are almost 100% vulnerable without multi-factor authentication. So it's really important to have this in place. You could also use passkeys. And what you might see is nowadays some vendors might be actually just telling you to check your email for a 6-digit code so you can authenticate with their website. So they're essentially putting the onus on you to make sure that your email is protected, as opposed to storing one of your passwords that could end up in a breach. So they're kind of moving the liability back to you as the owner who wants to get access to their website or log into their website. So passkeys, or that password functionality I was talking about, or having some kind of authentication tool like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator or something else, can help you with multi-factor authentication. Next slide, please. And we talked about those internet-facing vulnerabilities. So there's a lot of different issues out there. The biggest ones would be out-of-date computers. Computers, if you're still using, I know some people that are still using Windows 7, which is way out of date. Windows 10 just went out of date. So you should be really upgrading to Windows 11 if you're a Windows user, and then the latest Mac OS product if you're a Mac user. Linux typically updates their operating systems pretty regularly as well. So if you're using any of those products, make sure that you update your operating system on your home computer, or whatever version it is. And then also making sure that you check for updates on your phones. So whether you're using Android or iOS or some other type of functionality, you should be using or should be checking your settings to make sure that you're downloading the latest updates. The old adage about, oh, I've got a Mac or I've got an iPad, so my data is secure, it really doesn't work anymore. Hackers now know how to get into, attack Mac OSs or iOSs or Linux computers. So don't feel like you're safe if you're not using a PC because you're using Mac OS or iOS. It's really important nowadays to update all of those as soon as you can. If your computer prompts you to update, then definitely update it as soon as you can.
John, we do have a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you want to answer questions on a rolling basis.
Yeah, that's great. Let me just take a look.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. This is actually about passkeys, and the question.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
how
great
is a
question.
passkey different from two-factor authentication or a regular password?
So that's a great answer. A great question. I will answer it live. So a passkey is essentially a longer hashed version of a password but it's using the computer hashing capability with a private and public key. But what it's using is some type of biometric typically, or some type of PIN that you're inputting. So basically a passkey is a more secure way because it's a longer phrase that you don't have to remember. So for example, you can use a YubiKey, or you could use a FIDO2 key. That's just the standard for that. But you can use a key that you plug into your computer or you plug into your laptop that would allow you to register your fingerprint and create a passkey for a certain site. So, for example, if I log into Google, I don't just use my password and then look for a prompt from Google. I use my passkey. And so, right as of this date, passkeys have not been compromised, whereas passwords and a lot of those methodologies could be. So, at this point, passkeys have not been compromised, and you can essentially use those without having to create your own. You just basically use your fingerprint or biometrics. Maybe you have the capability of using an eye scan or a facial scan. But basically, the passkey is a more simple way of you authenticating, where the authentication, the what you have or is really what you are. You have a FIDO2 key, or you have your iPhone, or you have a computer that has a fingerprint pad on it, and then you're putting your fingerprint in there to register that computer, that device, with the vendor that you're trying to log into. And if you have any follow-up questions on that, happy to answer more of those as well. Let's move on to the next slide, please, beyond this. And I think, is this you, David, to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into this. So phishing scams, scammer sends a fraudulent email pretending to be a legitimate entity. Most times they happen via email. And successful phishing emails and texts are carefully constructed to look identical to real messages from well-known companies or senders or people you're used to interacting with. So you have to be really careful. We have a story that just came to us recently. This is a sort of quasi-phishing attack where a person at a company was called and told that it looked like there was a fraudulent wire transaction taking place, and they needed to click a link that they were going to be sent and go into a website, and it would prevent money from being fraudulently taken from them. But it turns out that was the money being fraudulently taken. So, they lost a lot of money, $75,000, this company. So you have to be really careful with these things and pay close attention because these guys are getting smarter and smarter all the time. So next slide. The acronym SLAM stands for Sender, Links, Attachment, and Message, and it's just a way to remember how to avoid a phishing scam. And so first is to check the sender. If you hover your mouse over an email address, oftentimes it will show you the full email address and not just the name attached to that. And then you can check that from misspellings or from company, something that doesn't look right. It's not Amazon.com, it's AmazonPlus.com or something slightly off. Be careful with links. Again, hover over the link so you can see where it's going to send you, because it might say, this is going to bring you to your bank or to a birthday card, but in fact, it's bringing you to someplace else. Then be really careful opening attachments. Make sure you know what you're opening. Only open things from people that are supposed to be sending you something. And then check the content of the message. Just if it seems strange, don't open it. When in doubt, just ask about it. And so the next slide. So here we get into business email compromise. This is a kind of a sophisticated type of cyber attack where scammers use social engineering to gain access. And that's a little bit like what I was saying, is they know that you're an organization, you might be involved in some activity, and they know that you're going to kind of quickly, and if you go to the next slide, I think it gives more detail on this. They're going to use these kind of your instincts, your concern about something, a sense of urgency, greed, curiosity, helpfulness. They're going to use these emotions of yours to get you to act quickly before you've had a chance to sort of really think something through. And I think we jump back over to you now, John.
Sure, and I was just going to use that the last slide to just give an example of my dad called me this morning. I was in a meeting, so I couldn't answer the phone, but then I looked at his voicemail, and he was asking me, hey, does this sound right to you that I could lose my OneDrive photos and files that were confidential if I don't respond to this email? And of course, they're targeting someone who's older with that fear and urgency component. And I had said to them, like, well, do you have OneDrive? And so he's like, no, I don't even know what that is. So I'm like, well, so then you don't have it. And we were talking about a scam that we got via text, a couple of us this weekend, talking about how our Coinbase crypto wallet, someone was trying to get into it, or that someone had gotten into it and accessed it. And if you don't have a Coinbase wallet, you don't need to worry about it. So again, just taking a step back and thinking about some of these things before you act on them, and not trying to be nervous about the fear element of this, can really help you to realize, like, hey, this is really not that big of a deal at this moment. Okay, so next slide, please. So a couple of things you can do. We talked about at the bottom of this screen, bottom right, we talked about monitoring your personal financial accounts, or using that have I been pwned to see what's been compromised out there. You can use a third-party service. You could subscribe to different services, and there's also the different credit reporting services that you could contact, like Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, to have them put fraud alerts on your data, and so that way they can freeze your credit so that someone couldn't establish more credit with you. Going back to the upper left corner of this, we didn't talk about this yet, but it's especially with business email compromises, a lot of times when a company is compromised, they're responding to the hacker via email if the hacker went to them via email, or they're responding. Like, how many of you online have gotten you don't have to answer this, but how many of you online have gotten a text when you just started a new job from your new boss saying, hey, do you have a minute? I just need you to do something for me. That happens all the time with people who announce on LinkedIn or somewhere else that they just started a new job. All of a sudden, they're getting text messages from their quote unquote CEO asking them to buy gift cards for people. And believe it or not, some people do that. So how do you try to stop some of those things? It's by using a secondary channel. So if someone is emailing me via email and something just seems weird about it, even though it might be a legitimate vendor that I'm working with, you should pick up the phone. I should pick up the phone, or maybe text them in a different way that I think is also a valid way of getting in touch with them, to say, hey, did you send me this email? And that might alert them to the fact that someone may have compromised their email. Or they might say, yeah, I sent it to you. Remember, this is based on that subject that we talked about. But having another channel to verify any kind of request, whether it's internally, if you're working for a company and you're in the HR department and someone emails you from their email saying, hey, can you change my direct deposit? making sure that you could maybe hit them up on Teams or Slack or call them or walk down to their office to ask to verify that change is really crucial and can stop most of these business email compromises. There's for your IT people, there's settings that could be put in place to allow full email extensions to be viewed or handle email other ways as well. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so I'll dive into this one. So as I said at the outset, at O'Connor, we run the data breach program. So in Massachusetts, companies are legally required to report data breaches affecting residents, private data to the Office of Consumer Affairs, that's us, and to the Attorney General's office. And then O'Connor must post a copy online of the notice sent to the residents that experienced the data breach. In 2024, companies reported over 2,200 breaches, resulting in almost 4.5 million instances of Massachusetts residents being affected. As of the 8th of October of this year, we've got over 1,600 notifications, resulting in 1.8 million instances of residents being affected. So if you receive a data breach notice in the mail, be sure to check its authenticity at the address seen there. Because information stolen through these data breaches, that's what leads to these identity theft crimes. And if you go to the next slide, we have some breakdown of the kinds of industries and the kind of breaches that you see. You can see the vast majority of cases, it's Social Security number. Also, reports by sector, you'll see it says other is actually is the highest report. We're actually going to look into that because that strikes us as a strange way for people to classify themselves. When you look into that a little bit, you see that some of the people that list themselves as other are actually healthcare companies or insurance companies or something. So why they're selecting other is a bit of a mystery to us. We're going to see if we dig into that a little. This is probably a good time to note something important. So just last month, on September 30th, the Aspen Institute released a report on frauds and scams and the scale of the problem. And it turns out, and Nick, I think, has the link, and he can put it in the chat. The scale of the problem is $158 billion in scams and frauds in America each year or last year. And the reason the scale of this has just increased exponentially for a couple of reasons. One, AI has made it, and we'll get to this a little bit later, easier for people who are not even particularly computer literate or technologically sophisticated to pull off some of these things, because they can get, a large language model or something like that to help them design this or write the code to create the email, things like that. So you just opened this up to a much larger class of people who can pull these things off. So I think on the next slide, we talk more about identity theft. So that's obvious to everyone, of course, but when someone steals your personal information, your Social Security number or bank account information, and then accesses your money, accesses your credit history, things like that. So all stuff you just have to be really careful with. And on the next slide, I think we have the, one thing you should do, and people so often forget to do this because they just don't think of it as a local crime, but file a police report and get a copy. You want your local police department to know these things are happening. This is how we get better records on these kinds of things. Place a fraud alert or a security freeze on your credit reports, with all the credit reporting bureaus. File a complaint with the FTC or the local Attorney General's office. Disclose any unauthorized transactions with your bank or your credit card companies, and obviously notify creditors and close any accounts that have been tampered where they're open fraudulently. And I think on the next slide, we have the numbers and the websites of the various credit reporting agencies that you can contact. And then next we get to the next slide, we have the quick discussion of around artificial intelligence and what it can do and how it has kind of supercharged a lot of this fraud and scam. And a lot of these are companies that are outside the United States. And the really bad news about that is it's just you have so little recourse at that point from a law enforcement perspective. The ability to ever get that money back is virtually zero. But I'm going to let John jump in as well.
Yeah, nowadays with AI, so I used to I was considering a couple years ago using my voice to authenticate with my bank account, but I've been doing podcasts for 4 or 5 years, and I realized with AI, my voice could easily be duplicated. So I don't do that. I don't authenticate with that. And my family, could get a call from what sounds like me saying, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I need help." And they would probably try to act on that. So I regularly talk to my family about, not not that, like, don't listen to that. I wouldn't call you and say that. Um, but people can mimic voices now very easily. And now, especially with the ability of AI now, you can create visual deepfakes of people as well doing things. And so AI has really been a good resource for people, but for criminals, it's a really powerful resource to attack people. We talked about slam phishing and, looking at those different elements. The messages now are much better crafted because it's AI, and maybe someone who's not a very good English speaker who may have sent you a phishing email before that looked a little wonky. Well, now AI can help them to create a really nicely crafted email message that will more likely trick you into clicking on it because maybe the hacker says, okay, look at this person, look at their social media, figure out what they like, and generate a message that's going to reach out to them and touch them. So if I like pets, or if I have pets, or if I like animal rescues, I might get an email that talks about rescues in my area needing to have people help adopt dogs or cats. So nowadays with AI, there's a much better chance that hackers can be successful with what they're doing. I saw a hacker provide a presentation. At the beginning of his presentation, he simulated a call from an IT person, and the voice sounded really familiar to me, and it was The Rock. So it was The Rock's voice simulating that it was an IT person trying to help someone with a notional problem on their computer. And this AI powered interaction sounded like a human and sounded like The Rock going through this entire call with this person trying to troubleshoot. And eventually what the AI was trying to do is steal a password.
Yeah. So John, I'd add, you don't even have to be a popular podcast host in order to get
Right.
your voice stolen. Now, if you have your voicemail on your outgoing message, they can call your number, get that voice, and then very quickly emulate that voice just from your voicemail. So the advice, I think, these days is to don't use your own voice on your voicemail. I mean, if you're on TV all the time anyway, or again, if you run a popular podcast, that's probably small potatoes. But for the most of the rest of us who aren't out in the public sphere like that, just let your phone robotic voice answer for you.
Yeah, great point. Definitely. All right, I think we hit AI pretty hard, so we'll move on. So USBs, the tool that was widely available and popular in the 2000s is back. So one of the things that pen testers use, and I'm talking about penetration testers, that are people that try to get around company security policies, is they'll drop a USB. It stands for Universal Serial Bus, I think it is. They'll drop one of those in a parking lot. When I worked for the FBI, there were some times where we would find a USB device in a parking lot, and they'd be like, "Hey, I found this in the parking lot." Sometimes hackers are trying to take advantage of the human curiosity or altruism that a person might want to try to find the legitimate owner or see what's on that thumb drive. And so in the cases of that USB that was dropped in a parking lot, I would bring it to a computer where I could scan that device and make sure that it wasn't malicious, and then see what was on there and try to find the legitimate owner. But there's a true example of a situation in this a company in the EU that was compromised, and they were a healthcare company because one of their employees picked up a USB from a airport while they were traveling in Southeast Asia, and they ended up plugging it into their computer when they got back to the EU, and it had ransomware on it, and that was how they penetrated this healthcare network, by having a physical USB introduced into that environment. So USBs, the physical drive is one thing, or the thumb drive as people might call it, but also this is a good point to talk about USBs at an airport as well. So, those USB charging devices at the airports, like be careful with those as well. If you have the ability to plug in with a regular plug, like adapter, where you could plug your USB into a USB charger adapter that was just take advantage of a regular 220 plug, do that. Don't use the public USB ports, because when you connect your phone or you connect your iPad or you connect your computer, unless there's settings set up to not share data, you're essentially sharing data with whatever that port is that you're plugging into. So whether you do that at a hotel or something else, unless you have some settings in your computer to block it from sharing data and to only charge, it's probably sharing data. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So backups, this is really important, and definitely in your work life, and in your home life. If you are worried about, like in the case of, my dad talking about, people saying, well, your photos will be gone. It is good to have a personal computer backup of your data, especially if you store, your pictures of children, family, whatever the case may be, trips that you've taken. It's good to have backup storage of that. And what I would recommend is some kind of offline storage. So nowadays you could buy a 1 or 2 terabyte external hard drive, and you buy it from a good vendor, and then you could back up your data to that. That's a really safe way of backing up your data on your computer, and doing it, every once in a while, so that if you do at home become a victim to ransomware or some other type of thing, that you have some remnants of your photos that are available offline that you could restore to another computer if you have to you have to get that computer wiped out. So having some kind of offline external hard drive is good. Using a cloud-based vendor that would store the data for you would be good. You could use a combination of there's different vendors out there that are now storing your photos online, if you pay for them, and that's fine too. They're supposed to have some protection in place to be able to do that, but just coming up with a plan to have a backup is important. And if you are in charge of IT for a company, it's really important to have the company's data backed up. Next slide, please. So we talked about the USB ports at like public locations. Public Wi-Fi is also really critical to be wary of. There are some times where you'd have, you might see, like if you're at South Station or North Station, you might see MBTA-Wi-Fi. Do you know for sure that that's the right Wi-Fi? It might sound like, paranoid of me, but I had typically gone to South Station. I would typically go to the information booth to ask, like, what is the correct Wi-Fi to connect to? And I've done that in airports as well, to make sure that if I was going to use public Wi-Fi, that I was using the correct one, that the information people told me was the right Wi-Fi. Once I'm on a public Wi-Fi, using a virtual private network is really important. So, this is basically something that creates a tunnel, if you will, between your phone or your computer and the internet, where a hacker can't necessarily get into your phone, even if they're on a public Wi-Fi, if you're using a virtual private network. So, there's a lot of free ones out there. You could use Proton has a free VPN. I think Nord has a free VPN. There's a bunch of different types of virtual private networks out there for you to use on your personal devices. If you have that VPN going, you might not be able to stream Netflix, but you at least would be able to do things like you check websites that you need to get into, where you're actually traversing that website with logins and passwords. So, if you say to yourself, you know what, my Netflix password, I'll change it when I come back from a trip. You could use that over public Wi-Fi, but anything else like banks, any kind of logins or passwords that are important, like work login and passwords, you should not be doing over public networks as best you can. Trying to take care of those at home before you travel is the best course of action. But if you do have to log in, then make sure you're on a VPN when you do log in to check your bank account or anything like that if you're using a public network. Secure websites, so same thing here as far as looking at when you're going to a website. If you see the little picture on the left, there's a chance that that is an unsafe website. Some websites use some type of encryption where you might see this, but generally stay away from that. If you see this connection warning sign, I think on iOS, I'm not sure if it even lets you click to go through that sign. You might just not be able to get to that website. But the reason that that pop-up comes up is because the computer or the device that you're using recognizes that something is weird about that website. And in this case, looking at Norton on the right, they're using that HTTPS, so which means that they're using a secure connection, and they have a valid digital certificate on that website. So they paid a third party to validate the website for them. So generally that is going to be okay. If you are redirected from ads or redirected from Google or somewhere, I would always recommend not going to the sites that pop up when you first do a Google search. Like for example, you might see pop-ups that say, if I'm searching for Lowe's or Home Depot, you might see some ads that come up at the beginning of your Google search that say, oh yeah, here's for Lowe's, here's for Home Depot. Just scroll down a little bit and look for Lowe's.com or look for HomeDepot.com or something like that, so that you can be sure that you're actually going to the right site, because some of those ads could be malicious. Next slide, please. And then I'm sure at work you might have talked about having an incident response plan, and having some type of plans for what you do and if there's a cybersecurity attack at work. Well, have something at home too. This is where you can talk about, what do I do when I travel overseas? How do I keep my my data secure? You can use a magnetic strip in some cases when you're traveling over in Europe. You could use a magnetic strip from your library card instead of your bank to access that outer door to get to an ATM. If you do something like that, have a plan in place for what you do when you go to a restaurant. Use the 10-second rule where you look around when you first get into a place. You look for 10 seconds. You look for the exits. You look for the potential threats. You look for, what you need to learn about that space that you're walking into. But have some type of a personal incident response plan and incorporate cyber into that. Next slide, please. Looks like we got a Q&A question.
Yes.
So yeah,
sorry, go ahead,
I
Bill.
can answer if you want. I can answer that live.
Great.
So I do that too, typically. So if you tether, so the question was, is tethering my laptop to my phone when I'm traveling on a public like the MBTA or at an airport or something, is that okay? Then you're basically what you're doing is you're transferring you're creating a hotspot for your phone, and then you're connecting, either via a USB or you're connecting via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to your phone from your computer. Generally, that is, basically you're using the same security that you would on your regular phone. You could still have a VPN on your phone and connect that way. So you could activate a VPN from your phone as well. But generally, that's typically what I do when I go somewhere. Is I don't use the hotel Wi-Fi. I don't use the like the public Wi-Fi. I have a hotspot on my phone, and I'll use my phone as a way of making sure that my data is as protected as possible. At that point, you're going over the carrier. So Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, still not 100% protected, or it's you're going over their protection over their lines. Those can be intercepted. So best case, if you're going to check your data and you're in a public environment, I would recommend using a virtual private network.
John, did you want to stay on this? This was a new slide that we had moved to about
Yeah.
incident response.
Yep.
To do.
So, if you do have a cybersecurity incident, like my dad this morning called me, right? I'm his trusted resource for help. Um, Call your trusted resource for help. And that could be somebody that you know, could be a family friend. It could be somebody in the family who knows what they're doing with computers that you trust. It could be, your local, some person in the community that you know that could help you. If your computer, if you think that your computer is compromised, you can disconnect it or not reconnect it from your home network. So if you had a problem while you were traveling, um, don't bring it home and then turn it back on. If you're traveling overseas, and like we see this, with traveling to countries that have a very strong, um, firewall presence or counterintelligence presence, like China, right? If you're traveling and you were just in China for work, um, you know, they may have looked at your computer, especially if you're working in something that was um, something proprietary. So what I used to do at the managed services provider is tell people, we're going to issue you a temporary computer. You'll travel overseas with that computer. You won't do anything but these specific tasks on that computer. And then when you get home, we'll wipe that computer and give you a new one. That was so that, important data that you have when you're traveling to a place like China is not captured by their customs when you go through their customs and you don't have possession of your computer or your phone. So, thinking about things like that, and looking for plans when you travel overseas or you have some kind of compromised device that could help. Changing passwords. So let's say you just didn't use a VPN or virtual private network and you logged in to your bank account from a hotel room. When you get back, changing the password for that would definitely be the smart way of going, so that you're not using a password that you used on a public Wi-Fi. If you do have an incident and you suspect some type of fraud, you could call your financial institutions to alert them about that, or to report anything that you did find as suspicious activity. And then you can also report fraud and cybercrime to the local PD and the FBI. The FBI, they aggregate data from cybersecurity breaches. And so if you go to ic3.gov and you write a report, you're not going to have the FBI most likely at your door the next day. They're probably going to take your information and look at, like, let's say you were able to say, okay, this person at this email address was soliciting me and trying to get my password. If you report that email address, the FBI will look at that email address in terms of anybody else that's reported that email address. And if they get enough people that crowdsource that email address to them, then they might open an investigation on that. So most likely in your instance, even with a substantial amount of loss, the FBI might not open a case on that. You might not even hear back from them. However, they might be taking your data as a way of looking at the aggregate theft from a hacker to be able to then reach out and get that hacker through an investigation. But reporting at ic3.gov can be very helpful and helps our national security apparatus to be able to look for these hackers that are overseas or maybe even in the United States that pose a threat to the general populace. And then check out your computers every once in a while with again a trusted resource. If you have an IT service provider, then bring it in to get it checked out if you suspect anything weird. And that these are some resources for yourself for you to look at. Again, we talked about the IC3 a little bit. There's some other resources. You can go to our MassCyberCenter, and we have our theme for the month. Again, cybersecurity is economic security. We have some tips in there that you can go and look at that covers some of what we talked about today. Of course, you can go to OCABR's website as well. And look at the great information they have there as well, and then any of these federal agencies. So with
John,
that, we can
I'll
take
add into
any.
that
Sure, go ahead, David.
I'll add into that a resource that we should have for you in the future. So Brad runs the data breach program here at OCABRA. He's the one, he actually helped, he gave us the slides that showed by sector and by type of information breach. But Brad also had the very smart idea to use the data breach information that we have going back multiple years now to actually compile some information and better educate consumers and businesses about the kinds of data breaches that we see out there, and to actually partnering with John and his team at the MassCyberCenter to do that and hopefully have that available in some period of time in the future. We don't really know how long it'll take.
Great tease. That's a great tease, David. Yeah, we're really proud of that, and we hope to add to the resources available to continue the thought leadership around protecting ourselves against all these different threats. So yeah, great. Thanks so much, everybody. I just do want to highlight, we will be sharing the deck to attendees, including the links that have been discussed today. We do have 10 minutes to go, and so I didn't want to just open it up to any potential questions in the chat. I think up until we do receive a question, I wanted to just ask a quick question to David and John. This is more of a kind of a fun related question, but what's one of the weirdest scam messages you've received, either phishing or other thing? I mean, we know the classic Nigerian prince from the 90s and 2000s, but any other funny or strange or scary scam messages that you might have received in the past?
I mean, I had a scary one in that I got an email and it had a picture of my house. It had the front of my house and my car. So clearly they knew my address, and it said, we know where you are. Here's literally, it's a Google. I'm sure it was just a Google Maps downloaded photo, but easy to find. And because my car was in the driveway at the time, it was blurred with the license plate, but you could still see it. And it said, made all these threats, and I better pay some money. And gets very personal when they actually have a picture of your house.
Yeah, that is very scary. Yeah, wow, it shows the length that these criminals will go. John, I want your question, but I know we have a couple of questions from the attendees. We'll go with the order we received it. What about, somebody had asked, what about using Face ID for passwords or logins? Is that compromised? Can that be compromised, especially with AI on the rise? I know brands like Apple and other manufacturers are utilizing facial scans. So any thoughts on that?
So again, creating those passkeys, you could use thumbprints, you could use facial recognition. At this point, it's a little more secure than a password. So at some point, probably there'll be some compromises of those, but at this point, Apple and Android, they're constantly improving their facial recognition algorithm. And typically when you're authenticating, you're doing it physically in person. So for example, if your phone has your password manager or your app on there, like you're literally authenticating with your phone. So you can't see that, I guess, in my virtual background, but so my face is authenticating with my phone or my laptop physically when I'm in person. So there's a level of safety with that, in terms of it's going to take someone, maybe being in your presence or doing something like that to be able to authenticate with something that you're logging into. So for now, I think the biggest issue is just trying to have third parties continue to maintain the security of passkeys and things like that, where you're using your face or fingerprints for authentication.
Yeah, great. Another question we have, do you have any password managers you would recommend? We'd have to be careful as a state agency not to be recommending any products over others, but I know there's a wide variety out there. John mentioned the recommendations maybe that you know of.
Yeah, so I would just say, if you look at I won't mention a specific vendor, but if you look at the characteristics of a password manager, if some password managers they encrypt every record. So like I had said, my password manager has like 400 records in it. Each one of those is individually encrypted. So if a hacker was able to break into my vault, they still need to break all the encryption on my individual passwords. And so you can look for a password manager that does something like that. You can look for a password manager that has FIPS 140 encryption, which is an encryption algorithm that NIST authorizes as kind of the standard right now for encryption. You can look at password managers that have ease of use, so you could use it on your home computer, your work computer, and you can share the passwords between those devices or other people. So I would say if you look at those types of things, and then also do a search when you're looking at the password manager. There have been some big password managers that had significant breaches. So do an internet search of the password manager that you're looking to buy from, and make sure that they haven't been part of a large breach in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I would really, the ease of use is important, because if it's too complicated to use, you're not going to use it, and you're just going to
Right.
default to the old bad habits. So find one that's good for ease of use. And they do often, if you Google search this and you do a little retail search, they'll categorize things like that. This one is very, very strong but harder to use. This one's a little easier to use.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Great tip. If you don't know how to use it or it's a pain, you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then the final question we have here. I get lots of text messages from people I don't know, random text messages. Anything else that folks can do besides deleting and reporting? Obviously, the known function within most providers where you scroll to the left and report as junk. John or David, any other tips? I know that I'll just offer quickly. I know there is a do not call list. Obviously, though, the do not call list relates to legal businesses. So bad actor criminals will not follow that.
Yeah.
Any other tips for folks?
I don't know, John, it's hard. We get them all the time. I get 10, 15 voicemails a day that are trying to tell me that I better contact the IRS. The newest Apple software does have a feature where if it's an unrecognized number, it will ask the person to explain. But they seem to have already hacked that, because I still get the voicemails. So
Yeah.
the machine that's calling is telling the other machine, yes, I'm a real person.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Let's just say you get a random text message about, the Easy Pass or something like that. You could just delete and report that as spam through your phone carrier. Like, no harm, no foul. Just don't respond to it. That's the one thing I would say is don't respond to those text messages, because then that lets someone know that there's a human on the other side of that. So that's the biggest thing, is not to respond to it. You can delete and report it. And then that, you can go on your day. If there's stuff that you want to do to get more involved, you could report it to that ic3.gov site. If you really were that interested in it, you could report the phone number to that site and say, I got this text from this phone number. If you really wanted to report it to an entity that would be tracking that stuff over time. If you do recognize suspicious activity, you could take screen captures of it just for your own edification down the road if you ever want to access that again. So, like, let's say, for example, there's a certain text message that you get, or a voicemail that you get. You could save them and just have them in case that you feel like you might need them again, but you don't have to do that.
Yeah, great tips. Obviously, I think the other final solution is just being vigilant and not panicking when you do receive those things. And unfortunately, you do have to still actively report those things, but let's hope that technology improves that we can do defending. Great. So I think we're just about at time. I want to thank, obviously, David and John for their time today. I want to thank the audience for their attendance and for their questions. It was a great conversation. I want to leave folks with 3 takeaways from today and 3 challenges as we continue Cyber Month. One is if you do not have multi-factor authentication on an account, try setting that up today and use some of the resources we talked about today. Number 2, audit your passwords. How many are reused? And use some of the other websites that have been pwned that John talked about. And then finally, for Cyber Month, we definitely try to share one cybersecurity tip with a coworker or a family member as we continue through the month. Just remember that you're not alone and that there are agencies out there to help as we navigate the online world. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the speakers.
I want to leave everyone with a movie recommendation before related to this. It's a movie called Thelma. It came out in 2024. It's about an elderly woman who gets a fake call from someone pretending to be her grandson, and she mails $10,000, and then she goes on a revenge tour to get back at the guy, and it's a lot of fun. Rent Thelma. It's really good and very touching, and it's cybersecurity relevant.
That's great. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We'll hopefully see
Thanks.
everybody soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.